Okay. Anyways, hi everyone. Morning everyone. It's 9:48. We're starting behind time. It's okay. This is the malware analysis and reverse engineering workshop. Today we're going to be doing a lot more analysis than reverse engineering, judging by the pacing from yesterday. But that's okay, right? How many of y'all are have played CTFs before? Can we raise hand? Okay, and those of y'all who have played CTFs before, are you guys familiar with decompilation or reverse engineering at all? Like raise hand if you already have some background in that or have tried it before. Okay, I've got nothing. I've got no one in the room, which is good. That means you'll actually learn something. Okay, ground rules, right? I just typed this out. If you're gonna yap, right, if you're gonna chit chat with your friends, I don't mind, but just make sure that you're not so loud that I cannot present, right? If you're lost, I want you to please raise your hand or ask, right? If you suffer in silence and you're like, oh, I don't know what's going on, right, and you don't say anything, I cannot help you. Like no one in the room can help you, right? If I'm going too fast, also say if I go through one section, you didn't understand it at all, you can just raise your hand and say, hey, can you please repeat that, right? Or repeat that slower. And ask questions if you're curious or if you're confused, right? I don't want to arrow people because I don't like arrowing people. But if it feels like people aren't asking questions or getting lost, I will start to arrow people. Can? Can? Okay. Awesome. So the trainers, that's me, right? I'm June, right? I currently work at Ensign Info Security as a malware and vulnerability researcher. Right? I used to be a CTF player. I am maybe sort of a CTF player still. I'm going to be studying at Cambridge to do my BA in CS. Right? I collect a lot of music. That's my fun fact. Right? And when I was in the military, I used to run PsyOps.
Hi, I'm your wonderful assistant. I'm Kane Hunt. I'm from the Singapore Institute of Technology. I am a year one in information security. I also used to play CTFs and I used to speedrun the PopCap game booklet images. My job here is to mainly assist all of y'all as you set up the software and maybe answer a few questions you'll have along the way that you won't be able to.
Okay, and at the back is where you all the way at the back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to stand?
You want to stand?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the content for today. Right, we're going to be covering maybe most of this. Okay, okay. Serious now. So, first thing before we even talk about reverse engineering or malware as a whole, right? What is malware? Come, can someone tell me what malware is? See, start. Don't want to reply. Don't want to answer questions. Okay, dangerous software. Does anyone know what the term malware actually where it comes from? Malicious software. Yes. Okay. So, in the big 26, right, the sort of malware that you usually see can be like free Discord Nitro.exe or like fake captcha or what? Free Robux.py. Yeah, you will see later. Yeah, that's true. Right. So yes, malware is short for malicious software. Colloquial term, computer virus. Right. Computer virus actually is a very specific term. Right. So it doesn't cover everything, but it's easier to say computer virus than malware over and over. Okay. So functions of malware. Right. Destruction of important data. Right. Theft of data. Theft of sensitive data. Spying, surveillance, and a whole lot of other things. Right. So before we cover any practical content, I am going to go through a bit of the history of malware because I hope you guys will find this interesting and maybe it will help to continue your interest in this sort of thing. So malware has been around for really long. It's actually been around for over 50 years already. And it's really evolved over the last 5 decades. Right? The common threads throughout all of these computer viruses are usually disruption, destruction, financial gain, or at times pure intellectual curiosity. So all the way back in 1971, this is what people consider to be the first piece of malicious software, right? The creeper worm. So it was before the internet was even a thing, right? And computers were first being connected up in ARPANET. And someone made a computer program that could spread to other people's computers over the network. So that concept of spreading through a network automatically was termed a worm, and Creeper was the first one, right? Then in 1986, the first self-replicating PC virus, Brain, right? It was made by two brothers who wanted to sell computer repair services. So they decided, the best way to do this, I'm going to put software on a floppy disk, right? And then if you plug in that floppy disk into anyone's computer, it will install the software onto the PC itself, and any other floppy disk that they put in will have the software installed onto it too. So that was the first self-replicating PC virus, and that's where the term virus really like came to be.
So
right?
yeah,
Because
in Python you
conceptually,
can
it's like
also do
a
things like
real
this. The main
biological
format
virus
of
that
the
spreads.
request in Python is basically
So
just
from the 80s into the
request.get
90s,
and then this
right,
website,
there
and then
weren't so
you
many
get a response
financial
object.
incentives
A
to
response
making
object
malware.
has certain
So virus
parameters like
making was more of like
response.text
a flex.
or
You just want to show, hey,
response.
I'm so good at coding.
You will
Look at the things I
you
can
have
do on a
you will
computer.
experience this in a
Right.
little bit.
Some viruses were destructive, but like
We'll be
the
doing some
vast
hands-on.
majority of them had all sorts of really cool payloads.
I
So we're going to
think
be using
after
the
we
term
go through
payload a
some
fair bit
common
later,
bugs.
right? This is a proper term
So
used
first of
in the
all,
industry as well, right? So some examples
first
of
of
viruses
all,
during this era.
let me
In
skip that.
1987, the Jerusalem virus came out. So this was the first logic bomb, where basically it would only trigger on Friday the 13th. So every other day of the year, your computer will be fine. But if it's Friday the 13th, it will wipe all the files on your computer. So that was the first time that someone
move on.
conceived of it, right? So that's why it's so notable. 1991, Casino. This was a piece of DOS malware that came out from Malta. Anyone know where Malta is? Malta, the country, the tax haven. Yeah, correct. So big gambling scene there too, right? And this piece of malware called Casino, right? It was a virus which, when it activates, requires you to play slots. And if you play slots and you don't get 777, it deletes all your files. It's like a gacha game, correct? That's why I put that in. Okay, so the 90s was when computer viruses really started to evolve a tiny bit, right? So this is when Windows 95 and Windows 98 came out. So we're moving into graphical interfaces by this point, right? No more MS-DOS. Well, MS-DOS is still a thing, but like Windows 3.x and then moving into Windows 95 and 98, right? Uh, Groups dedicated to writing viruses and developing virus tech started cropping up. So these were called VXers, right? Some of the most infamous groups, well, the most infamous one is 29A, which is hexadecimal for 666, right? So they started distributing e-magazines that talked about how to write viruses and shared virus samples. And in general, this was just like swaggy, right? So some of the stuff that they produced during this time, the Nuke VX group, they created what's called the Virus Creation Laboratory. So it's the first time that someone could make a computer virus without even knowing how to code. Like they just made a util where you just, oh yeah, I want the virus to do this, this, that, and then it will produce the exe for you. 29A produced Esperanto in 1997, which was the first cross-architecture virus ever made. So it could run on Mac and it could run on Windows. And looking past that, because like VX groups were more of just like, ooh, what cool tech can I come up with, right? Talking about actual financial incentives or destruction or people wanting to cause harm, right? The 90s were when this really, really destructive viruses started to come out, right? And since people started using like Office Suite, like Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, viruses that spread through email or spread through Microsoft Office started to come up a lot more. So that virus over there is called Magister, right? It targeted specifically like lawyers and people who work at courts and stuff, right? Anyways, so some notable examples from this era, this Chernobyl virus, right? It would activate on the anniversary of Chernobyl. Does anyone know the anniversary of Chernobyl? I forgot.
Huh?
I forgot.
You just lied. It was on September 11th.
No, it's like June something, June 4th.
Hey, that's you.
Okay, anyways, yeah, so this virus was extremely, extremely destructive because it would overwrite what's called the master boot record of a computer. And this was something that had to be flashed onto a chip. So if your computer got hit by this virus, you couldn't even reinstall Windows if you wanted to. You have to bring your PC down to a shop, and then they would have to reflash the chip on the motherboard so they could fix it. So this caused about $250 million in damages at the time, which once you adjust for inflation is, I don't know. 1999, the Melissa worm. So this was the first really destructive email worm. So I mean, look at this email, right? If you receive something like this today, you'll be like, oh yeah, that's a virus, right? But in the 90s, people were like, ooh, cool document, you know. So what would happen would be you receive this document in your email, and then you're like, ooh, cool document that my friend sent me, right? And then you would open the document, and then it would send itself to everyone in your email, and then they would get it too, and then afterwards you'll delete all your files. So yeah, this caused about $80 million in damages. So that concept of spreading through the internet, right, spreading through email, spreading through exposed network ports. Mind you, in the early 2000s, this was also when like Kazaa was a thing, or LimeWire. Does anyone know what LimeWire is? Awesome. What's LimeWire? Yeah, it was a way to like pirate software back in the early 2000s, which was a peer-to-peer method. So you would have to connect to someone else's computer to download the pirated software. Yeah, it's like early torrenting, correct? Yes. So lots of new ways of spreading viruses came out, right? And people were like, oh, we can cause a lot of damage with this, right? So some examples: 2004, the Sasser worm. So the person that made the Sasser worm reverse engineered a Microsoft security patch to discover a vulnerability which allowed them to spread the virus automatically through a network. So you don't even have to do anything. If you're just connected to a network with someone infected by Sasser, it will spread to your computer on its own. And afterwards, it crashes this process called LSASS on your computer. So after using your computer for like 5 minutes, it will just crash. Um, so in 2000, this is one of the most famous widespread viruses of all time, the I love you or love letter worm. It spread during Valentine's. Right. So again, very great email that in the big 26 you know not to click on. Right. But imagine it's 2000 and you receive an email from your dear friend with a love letter for you .txt, but .vbs, oh glub, you know. So this was an email worm, which again would spread automatically through email, and it would delete all your files. Duh, right? So this caused about $10 billion in damages, right? And it was dead simple. Like you could open this in Notepad and read how it was written. Also, it was written by someone in Manila, so shout out to the Philippines.
I don't remember.
Something like that. That was the original intent, but
I see.
I don't know if that's true.
Okay, well,
You can fact check that while I continue with the slides. Okay, so from the late 2000s onwards, this is when people realize, oh, actually I can make a lot of money writing malware, right? So that's because people start doing things like online banking, or the internet became a lot more widespread by this point, and then people were making accounts, making forum accounts, buying stuff online. So
that was correct. Yes.
that's true.
The one attempts to download a computer Trojan that steals dial-up internet access credentials to fulfill this aim. Yeah.
Wow.
Nice.
Okay.
Awesome.
I didn't even know that. Anyways, yeah. So stealing information and hijacking computers started becoming just something that people were like, oh yeah, we can do this now, right? So I'm gonna speed run through a few more examples here, and I want to show something old and I want to show something new. So back in 2009, SpyEye. So this was a keylogger. Anyone know what a keylogger is? It's self-explanatory. Open to the floor. Keylogger.
You're nodding.
Correct. So whatever you type into your keyboard, it notes it down and then it sends it to the attacker, right? It also was a form grabber. So if you filled in a form online, it will grab the information from the form, right? It would steal bank credentials and other passwords, right? And in general, this cost about $1 billion in damages. So this concept of info stealing, right? Stealing people's credit card numbers, bank accounts, user accounts, form details, ubiquitous, right? Starting from 2022, for example, right, Luma Stealer started to come out, and it was a MAAS. Anyone know what an MAAS is? Malware as a service. Yes, very good. So malware as a service is because in the modern day and age, malware has become a business, right? People would write malware and sell it to other criminals who want to steal data. So it divorces the process, right? and then the malware authors just make money selling the malware to other people. Those people will then hold the liability. Like let's say they get caught putting the malware into people's computers, they settle themselves. The malware authors just get the money, right? So yeah, Luma Stealer and MAAS, right? So as mentioned, it's a service that other people can buy, and then they put the info stealer on people's boxes themselves. So around 400,000 computers infected with this as of 25, right? If you do the math, imagine each computer had bank credentials on them, and each bank account had about like $1,000 there. That's at least $400 million. So you know that's pretty good. Then botnets, right? So back in 2011, I was 6 years old. I was 6 years old and I heard about this. Right, Game Over Zeus, right, was a peer-to-peer botnet. So every computer infected by it could communicate with one another, and it was also a piece of it was a banking Trojan as well. So what the criminals that were that built this was doing was it would steal your banking credentials, then it would launder money through people's bank accounts through this network, and then it would also use any computers that were in this network to DDoS people's servers as well. Who knows what DDoS is? Denial of service. What's the purpose of a DDoS? Crash a server. Yeah, so this is a very common thing in the modern day as well, where people will DDoS websites to try and take them down, right? An example, a more modern example of DDoSing, right? Mirai. So Mirai came out in 2016, right? And it would infect IoT devices, right? So like routers, smart fridges, smart TVs, Roombas. What other smart devices exist? Smart thermostat.
Like your fridge.
I
My
said
Chinese
fridge.
vacuum I got from Shopee.
Yeah, the Chinese vacuum you got from Shopee. Your Huawei phone.
I mean,
Yeah. Nah, that's not an IoT device. Anyways, yeah. So this was a botnet that was formed up of IoT devices, and again, it will automatically spread on its own. It will search for any insecure IoT devices exposed to the internet. Then it would clone the device and then install the malware onto it. The guy who made this wanted to sell DDoS protection services to Minecraft servers. Yeah, so he thought the best way to do this was to come up with a botnet to DDoS Minecraft servers. Then he would go to those Minecraft servers and be like, "Hey guys, I can stop you from getting DDoSed."
I want to see.
I don't know if he tested it on Hypixel, but he made a lot of money selling DDoS protection services. It was effective, yeah, and that's the thing. That was the same intent of the people who came up with the brain DOS virus back in the 1980s. As you can see, all malware authors have the same brain, and they've just used it for the last 30 years.
Exactly.
Correct. Okay, and then finally, RAT. RAT. Anyone know what RAT is short for? Remote access Trojan, very good, yes. So a remote access Trojan is a piece of malware which lets people remotely access your computer, and then they can play around on your computer without your consent, right, over the internet. So back in 2008, for example, MAAS was already a thing, but mostly restricted to governments and spy agencies, right? So Dark Comet was a rat that was used during the Syrian civil war, right, to spy on activists. Spying on activists is something that governments do all the time. They keep doing it, right?
They did use Mirai on Hypixel. Yes, that is true.
Awesome. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so to this day, right, of course, rats still get distributed all the time. I'm pretty sure like 50-50 chance if you download free Discord nitrohack.exe, it's a rat, right? And again, regular info stealing stuff, credential harvesting, key logging, and they have interesting comms as well, right? Because they need a way to send the information back to malware authors, and they will communicate through Telegram, Discord. Some of them use the blockchain even, right? So it's all really, really interesting stuff. And something else that a lot of people, like at least in the mainstream, is more commonplace, ransomware. So 2017 was when WannaCry occurred, right? And that's when it really threw ransomware into the mainstream, because like so many people got hit by WannaCry, right? You would just see this everywhere, right? And some of the worst cyber attacks in recent history, with the most damages caused, like monetarily, were through ransomware. So 2016 and also 2018, right? Petya, not Petya, right? So I mean, I hope everyone in the room has an idea of how ransomware works. It gets onto your computer, it encrypts your files, it locks them up, and then it extorts money from you. like pay up in Bitcoin. If not, you can't unlock your files. You know. So Petya, they made about $10 billion. And this led to the rise of ransomware groups. So they were groups that are dedicated to developing ransomware, selling it to people as a service, and just doing whole lots of extortion. So Lockbit, very famous Russian ransomware gang, right? Malware as a service, they made over $500 million in ransoms because they just didn't care who they were hitting. They would ransom hospitals, they would ransom schools, they would ransom governments, right? Like whatever. So yeah, that's malware, or at least the history of malware from like the 80s until now, to get a feel for what exists and what are the types of things that we might analyze, right? And in this workshop, we're going to be focusing on these sort of modern malware, right? So like info stealers, rats, ransomware. Um, Although this, I do think we have to downscope a bit because I originally planned a lot more content, but I don't think I can squeeze it into the 2 days. And we'll go through the whole. Don't like the term kill chain. Like industry loves to use the term kill chain, but it's really dumb. Chain, right? When it comes to malware getting on someone's computer and then doing things. So obviously, at some point, malware needs to be delivered onto the computer, right? It needs to get onto your computer somehow, and then it needs to get installed somehow. So this is what we usually call a first stage, right? We'll be looking at some first stages later. Then the payload would be the next stage, right? What it downloads onto your computer, which is usually the malware itself, right? So you have a thin first stage, which is just like a payload carrier, then the payload itself. Then the payload needs to stick onto your computer, right? Because you get the virus on, and then if like the antivirus just deletes it, oh man, or like it goes on, but then the user restarts the computer and it never runs again. So like a bit self-defeating, so persistence. And then once you are persisting on the computer, once you made it on, then it's time for action, right? Steal data, delete data, uh, remote access, whatever, right? So we will attempt to cover this entire flow end to end. And this is an extremely simplified model as well. This chart over here, this is what the delivery process for Zloader looks like. Right, so this came from the Microsoft security research team, right? So you can see how complicated it can be, right? Like secondary downloads, they need to transfer the files here and there, and then it eventually gets into your computer, blah blah blah, right? So we won't cover anything this complex. Okay, so GLUB, right? With all of this in mind, so now we have a clearer view of the scope of malware and what it can do, right? How do we study it, right? And why do we study it? Okay, so how do we study malware? So this is the second part of the workshop title, right? Reverse engineering. So reverse engineering at an extremely high level is the art of figuring out what programs do. So I've got a picture of a disassembled watch here because I mean that too is a form of reverse engineering. I mean it's kind of intuitive at a base level what reverse engineering is supposed to accomplish, right? You have something that's built up and complete, and then you want to take it apart and then see how the internals of it works. Sometimes you want to put it back together, sometimes you don't, right? And reverse engineering extends beyond just software as well, right? There's a lot of hardware reverse engineering that exists. If you ever wondered why Chinese fighter jets look very suspiciously similar to American fighter jets.
Well, that's out of scope, but that's
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of military tech gets reverse engineered all the time. Yeah, for example, right? So this is very commonplace in industry, right? People obviously aren't going to go out and say, yes, we developed this by reverse engineering your competitor's product, right? But like, yeah, it's a thing that happens all the time. So we're going to abstract this a bit, right? So that we have the high level concepts down, and then when we eventually do it, then it makes sense how all of this corresponds. So every program on your computer can be thought of as a function. Who has taken math and learned what functions are?
yeah.
Functions in math. Okay, good. Then I don't need to explain what functions are. Either way, you take in some input and it produces some output, right? This is a very high level abstraction. So like let's say a word processor, right? Like Microsoft Word, Your input is the text you type on the computer, on the keyboard. The output is your Word document, right? The program could be Valorant. Your input is your game inputs, your WASD and your mouse. Your output is bottom fragging. Yeah, and a common goal in reverse engineering is to deconstruct the function, i.e. to understand how the function works, right? So this is the core idea that we're trying to gun for, like mentioned just now, right? How does malware work, right? What is it doing? How does it do it? Because when you get a computer virus, it's not just going to tell you, hey bro, I'm going to steal all your data now, bye, right? You want to know what data it's stealing, how it does it, right? So it's like if given an fx, you want to know what the equation is. Sometimes you literally want to reverse what a program does, right? You want to undo the effects of the program, right? So that's program inversion, right? So let's say you get hit with ransomware, but you don't want to pay the ransom. If you reverse engineer the ransomware to understand how it produced the encryption key, maybe you can produce the encryption key yourself and then unlock or decrypt your files without having to pay for the ransom, right? So it's like getting an F inverse function, takes an output and gives you the input. And there's cases where you want to change what a program is doing, so you want to alter its behavior, right? Assuming people in this room play video games, that's what you accomplish when you mod a game, right? Game modification is in essence program alteration, right? Patching the program, changing what it does. So it's like producing some alternate function that's similar to the original function, but then when you put in the same input, it produces some new output. I know this is a bit abstract, so I'll try and concretize this with an example from malware. Right? If we look back to WannaCry, right, researchers that reverse engineered it found a kill switch domain inside the original distribution. So that meant if someone registered a certain website, WannaCry would stop spreading, and they found that through reverse engineering. Right? They opened up, they decompiled WannaCry, and they found this website. So then they just registered it, and this in essence flipped the switch inside the program and stopped the spread of WannaCry for a bit, like for like a week. So why do we do all this, right? I mean, I feel I've elucidated it a tiny bit in these last few examples, but in general, in the context of security research, reverse engineering is the foundation of a lot of it, right? Even when you're doing pwn, so I'm assuming a lot of y'all did pwn yesterday, right? When you do pwn, your pwn trainers are nice enough to give you like the source code, right? You get the source code, or you get the no. Even if you don't get the source code, you still get the binary. You get
Yeah.
you did get the source code, yeah, because Nicola Winata would give you the source code, right? But in actual reality, right, if you try and pwn a device, they're not going to give you the source code, right? Like let's say you're trying to pwn a Wi-Fi router, you're not going to ring up Singtel and be like, hey Singtel, I want the source code for your router so I can check if there's bugs. They're just going to say no, right? So what do you have to do there? You need to reverse engineer it yourself, right? In the context of malware, some of the goals that we want, remediation. So if we know how the malware works and what it does, then we can undo some of its effects, right? Attribution, this is also really important in the modern day. You want to know where malware came from, right? Because like, let's say you know that, oh, this malware is being distributed by the Chinese, that's coming from this specific cluster of servers, then you can tell an ISP, hey, can you guys like block these servers so people stop getting Chinese ransomware, right? And defense, I mean, duh, right? You want to know how these viruses work so they can defend against them. And reverse engineering, obviously, is not a trivial task, right? There's many challenges in it, right? To analyze a computer program, like I said, ideally you want its source code, but you don't always get what you want, right? That's hardly the case. So most programs are compiled. I'm gonna explain like compiled versus interpreted later, even though I'd assume some of the people in the room do know what the difference is. But we're here to be thorough and comprehensive, right? Obfuscation and anti-analysis, anti-debugging, right? Malware authors want you to have a horrible time trying to reverse engineer their stuff. So like in my day job, if I look at a malware sample, right, usually it looks like this. So it's not exactly very easy to analyze. So it comes with thousands of functions, right? No human can realistically reverse engineer that manually, right? So today we're going to learn some of the techniques to identify, analyze, and reverse engineer programs, right? So I mean, decompilation, that's going to come later, like very late into the day. Deobfuscation, and some forensics analysis. So like I know for people who have played CTFs before, you might not like forensics because forensics is usually a very poorly written category. But in the context of the industry, forensics is really, really important. And having a thorough understanding of how programs interact with systems is critical, right? Even if you're just doing malware analysis, you need to know how the malware operates. And a lot of the time, you're going to be doing incident response, which means someone gets infected with malware and you want to know how they got infected. And that in on itself is forensics analysis, right? Yeah, so that's the intro out of the way. Any questions?